This one says, for a while now, I've been feeling I really am on the brink of something. And I felt like you mentioned being on the brink of something when we were in Amsterdam. And when I asked in my meditation this morning, on the brink of what, I received the future. So this is me purposefully, powerfully creating my future now with intent. I can hear it and feel it most of the time. I know how to get into that space. I can get there quite quickly now. That's a nice thing to know, isn't it? That you are an extension of that non-physical knowing. And sometimes you are in the place of allowing it. We want to comment on the brink of what, because there is a trending that has been happening with all of you on all subjects. Some years ago, in the concept of, Esther's been saying this a lot lately, things are putting themselves together. And one of the things that Esther remembers really put itself together was this land that the Abraham-Hicks publications, buildings, and such are. And Jerry found a piece of land. It's actually right on Interstate 10. And it was for sale. And Jerry and Esther walked that property. It was 6 acres. And they asked us what we thought, and we said, this is your land. And it was a little intimidating to Jerry and Esther at the time, because it's land that was high in value, much more so even now. They were selling it by the square foot, as a matter of fact. And so Jerry and Esther purchased that 6 acres. And then Jerry said to Esther, I don't know, we really don't need interstate frontage. We just need some place to set up some computers and such. So maybe we'll look for something else and just sit with this land until we feel inspired about it. And so some time went by, and they stayed where they were, in a little rental house that was working fine, not really satisfying to Esther in many ways, but it was working fine. And then one day, someone contacted them, a realtor, and said, I have a piece of property that adjoins yours and wondered if you would be interested. And Jerry said yes. And so then they purchased this other piece of property, which was about 7 acres. And then not long after that, someone else called, here's a piece of property, but it's landlocked. And I wondered if you might like it. And Jerry and Esther looked at this plot, and Jerry said, Esther, and Esther said, Jerry, because they knew exactly what this little piece of land was. Again, it was another 7 acres. But it was a piece of property that Jerry and Esther had been taking their walks on hot summer days. It was shaded, and they were taking the deer paths and crouching low in order to get under some of the branches. And so they recognized it, and right away they decided to purchase it. And so that's sort of the way it went. A piece, another piece, another piece, another piece, all of them coming to Jerry and Esther, being offered to them, until they now have a contiguous piece of property that's about 40 acres. So now we're getting to the part that you are getting to. So long after, they built the treehouse first, and then another building, and then something that they call the Garage Mahal, because it was a practice building so that they could figure out how to put this spectacular roof on a building. Someday we'll tell you all of that story. But so now they're sitting in this building that we are broadcasting from. It's a building that Jerry called the center building. He saw it as the sort of the center of what goes on here. There's a small meeting room and such. And Jerry and Esther were sitting in the back wing of it, in the beautiful room at the end of the building that they called their office. And as they were sitting there, it occurred to Jerry that that was the land that they had walked on and taken their walks on. And now here they are sitting in a beautifully finished building on the same property. And Jerry said, Esther, do you mind getting Abraham? I would like to ask them a question about this, because I think we're sitting right here on that spot where I said to you that day, long before there was anything on the property, long before we even owned the property, Esther, can you feel it? Feels like happy people have lived here. I wonder what was happening on this property in years gone by. There was no evidence of anything on the property, no electrical or water or anything like that. But Jerry felt like happy people had been there. And so as Jerry posed that question to us, we said, you are the happy people. And it stunned Jerry because he had felt it as something that had happened in the past. And then we were telling him that when he had felt it, when he was feeling it, that it was something that was going to happen in their future. And now we're saying to you, but it was something that vibrationally had already happened. In other words, they had dreamed it into place. They had imagined it into place. They had vortexed it into place without even knowing it. They had appreciated this about that and appreciated this about that. And they had known what they didn't want, and they'd known what they did want, and they had created the vibrational reality of this environment long before they found the first piece of it, and then the next piece of it, and then the next piece of it, and then finally that piece of it. In other words, it was in the process of coming together. And so when you received the words, the future, when you ask, what am I on the brink of? What your inner being was saying to you is that you are on the brink of allowing yourself to be such a consistent vibrational match to what's in the vortex, that even though it was present tense, even though it is present tense, that it was about to be realized by you. And that's why you felt that it was future. There were other questions that are not in the stack today that some of you were asking about, wanting to know how this all fits together. But more and more, you are coming to realize the eternal nature of your being.